and gentlemen. My name is Lino Guzzella, and I have the very great honor to introduce to you our special guest of today, Satya Nadella. He'll be here in a minute. Thanks a lot for hosting us, Roland, in your conference. We enjoy, of course, very much to be embedded in the real life. I'm not sure if I need to introduce to you Satya Nadella, born 67, got a BA, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Manipal Institute of Technology, a Master of Science in Computer Engineering, so he bridges these two worlds from the University of Wisconsin, has an MBA also from the University of Chicago. He started his career at Sun Microsystems. Who remembers Sun Microsystems? Okay, that's a room full of CS guys then. And then in '92, he joined Microsoft, where he was responsible from the very beginning from research and development. Satya Nadella is the man behind the move to the cloud of Microsoft. Without him, that wouldn't have happened, so big, big successes. And of course, in 2014, Microsoft chose him as the third CEO after Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer to lead this company. So please join me to welcome Satya Nadella with a very warm hand applause. We'll have a chat, some minutes, and then later on we'll invite Mark Polyphate to join us, but we start first with a couple of questions that are more general. It's a big honor to have you here. Thank you very much for coming. Microsoft is important to ETH, and I hope that ETH is also important to Microsoft. We'll come to that in a minute. But let me start the discussion. Why are you visiting Switzerland? I mean, Switzerland is a small country, it's a small market. Is it important to Microsoft, or is it just a courtesy visit that you do here?
First of all, thank you so much, Professor, for having me here. It's great to be at ETH. You know, it's an interesting question because for me, as a CEO of a multinational company, one of the ways I think about our business is, and our mission is, how are we contributing in every country and every community to local innovation and local surplus. If you think about it, right, even today, even in the morning, I had the chance to meet some of the largest multinationals in Switzerland. They're all our customers, they're all our partners. But it's not just about, okay, we have technology that they're using, but I'm most interested in how are they creating technology that improves their competitiveness. Same thing with small businesses. Are they becoming more productive? Whether it's the public sector institutions here, are they becoming more efficient? Is whatever technology that we are creating, is it creating better educational outcomes or health outcomes? That, to me, is the only long-term way for us to have a stable business. So if all we do is come into a country and extract, if we don't contribute to the local competitiveness, we won't have a long-term business. So therefore, visiting a country like Switzerland, which obviously has, I think, a big role to play in many industries, whether it's life sciences or whether it is in manufacturing or in financial services, and making sure we're doing our job to contribute to their success is important.
This is a weird country. We have many, many small and medium-sized enterprises, but you also have very, very big multinationals. Right. I'm sure that's very interesting for Microsoft and other companies to understand how this ecosystem comes about. Look here, since you're here, we want to profit, of course, of your present. Could you tell us a little bit, what are the technology trends, as far as you can, of course, that you foresee in the near future that will have a big impact in this community here?
I mean, one of the most fascinating things that's playing out is how computing is getting more distributed, right? I mean, if you think back, some of the writings out of Xerox PARC in the mid-'80s even talked about ubiquitous computing. And here we are in 2018, where that is absolutely happening, right? Computing is getting embedded in the real world. I forget now, even I was leading the case study of the, I guess it's your airport park. It's called the Circle. And it was fascinating to see how they're embedding, essentially, the IoT platform in the office park, in the airport itself, but in fact creating that as a platform so that many, many services can get created. So distributed computing is getting more and more distributed, where every place, everything in every industry is getting more computerized, so to speak. Now, the interesting thing is, what are we doing with all this compute capacity that is there in the real world? That's where I think the defining technology of our times perhaps is AI. And when I say AI, I sort of broadly use it like it's being used nowadays, which is basically reasoning over large amounts of data to create some new value. It can be value in computer vision, it can be value in speech, it can be natural language, but changing the curve of both the human-machine interface, but as well as basically having some predictive power. So I think AI is the defining technology that gets to use this computing power. But the last thing that I'm also excited about is the frontiers of the human-machine interaction and the interface itself. And some of the work we're doing with mixed reality, to me, it's the ultimate computer, right? When you have in front of your eyes the blend between what is digital and analog, you've now created a much more malleable, much more natural way to interact with what is digital and perhaps even enhance your interaction in the natural world. So these three things, I would say, ubiquitous computing, AI, and new, what I think described sometimes as mixed reality or multi-sense, multi-device experiences, are really the defining trends.
Sounds to me like a very, very powerful recipe to change many things. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a doomsayer, but of course many people that I encounter daily, politicians, journalists, just the average guy on the road, they're a little bit scared about these developments. They say, hey, are these developments taking away my job? Are these developments controlling me all the time? If you think what happens in other countries. Is Microsoft, are you personally concerned about that? Are you dealing with these issues? Or are you saying, nah, technology will move on anyway and we don't care about this?
No, we care. We care, and we care deeply about this. Because at some level, one thing that we've learned, if anything, even with digital technologies as they become more pervasive in our societies, is we've got to care about the opportunities, but also the unintended consequences. And since we are on the topic of AI, I would say the first thing we should even recognize is the opportunity in front of us. Right? One area that I'm very, very passionate about is accessibility. There are 1 billion people with disabilities in the world who don't get to fully participate in our societies and in our economies. But AI can. For example, with somebody with visual impairment can use the Seeing AI work we have done or the Soundscape work we have done and have mobility. We have eye gaze technology that's built into Windows, which gives somebody with ALS the ability to type. Or anyone with dyslexia using learning tools can read. So to me, AI, in fact, can create more jobs for people who are unemployed or underemployed today. But that said, there are real challenges. There is going to be automation, and there's going to be technological displacement. So one of the things that, at least from a design principle place, we start is, let's use AI as augmenting human capability. Make sure we are building out AI with a set of principles around fairness, around robustness, privacy, security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability, such that AI's unintended consequences are mitigated. And quite frankly, even on engineering, in fact, one of the things that a school like ETH should do and can do is raise the bar on what I'll call the engineering practices around AI. So for example, take a language model. The classic language model today trains over human corpus and then has these word embeddings that have bias in them. So we now need to de-bias even a trained model. So I think the state of the art of engineering needs to be improved. So that's sort of work that we're doing in our labs. And lastly, having ethics around AI. So you don't want to spring an immature facial recognition model when it's not ready for some use cases. So really thinking through whether it's on the employment side or whether it's on the ethics side or on the robustness and fairness side, I think is very important.
Face recognition is going to change, I think, a lot of our business models. This is a very powerful tool, and as you said, it needs to be taken care of in a very responsible way. Well, it's easy to talk about these things in a room with people who understand what the AI is, understand what deep learning algorithms are. But I'm always concerned about, and I alluded that a little bit to that before, how do we convey this message to the just regular person that has a right to understand what's going on around him or her? Does Microsoft have a special program on that, or do you have some special ideas how we could partner maybe together to just reach kids in the school, but also people that are far away from technology?
I mean, I think definitely there's a lot that we all collectively as participants in bringing about this technology to the world should do together. But I would say take the three big areas that I think where there needs to be both partnerships between academia and the industry, between industry and the regulators even, would be one is let's take privacy. Clearly where the world is going is on a secular basis, privacy will need to be treated as a human right. And at this point with GDPR, you even have regulation. So therefore, I think any product that we build going forward has to, in some sense, adhere to that core principle, that data that's being collected is being secured, it's being transparently used to benefit the users, and so therefore, really making sure that we not only build products that adhere to the regulation of GDPR, but give, in some sense, trust because of that to users is, I think, a huge step forward. Same thing with cybersecurity. One of the challenges of cybersecurity today is we don't have a moral equivalent of something like the Geneva Convention. So one of the things that we called for was, because if you think about it, any cyber attack has most impact on small businesses and individual consumers, because large businesses in general have a lot more of their own operational security and cyber defense. Whereas the sort of populations that are most vulnerable are small businesses and consumers. And so therefore, having something like the Geneva Convention, so we as Microsoft brought a bunch of industry participants together under a tech accord so that we can then say, let us in fact use all of our collective security prowess to protect these vulnerable populations. And we are hoping that even nation states will join this. So that I think is a step forward. And the same thing I think we can do in AI. As well. Facial recognition is a good one, right? Which is, it can do a lot of good things in facial recognition, even convenience, except if you're using it to discriminate, for example, then that would be a very problematic thing. And so therefore, having even regulation, perhaps, much like GDPR on privacy, I think there will be regulation that is necessary in order to ensure that some of these AI techniques are being used in a robust and fair way. When you go to a bank, they already are subject to regulation when it comes to giving credit. So if that is the case, then why wouldn't that be the case with some of these other emerging technologies?
So I get that for you as well, regulations well made with a reasonable frame are absolutely essential and also beneficial for the progress in our field. Do you agree with me?
I agree with that, because in some sense, good, the key word is well-made regulation can do two things. One is it can increase trust in technology all around, and in fact bring down transactional costs. So if anything, even on something like GDPR, that's why we took even some of the basics of GDPR, and we are now making it available throughout the world. In other words, our adherence to GDPR is not just in Europe, but is a worldwide.
Just need to make sure that we have an intensive dialogue with politicians, that they do not overstep the boundaries and do not create regulations that are really harmful and at the end detrimental to the whole process. That's right. I remember Brad Smith at the last annual meeting of the World Economic Forum that he raised this idea of this Geneva Convention.
That's right.
So I wish you a lot of luck in that. Let's change a little bit subject, but it's not completely unrelated. To be frank with you, Microsoft is kind of a very fascinating partner and also somehow a little bit a threatening partner. Let me explain that to you. of course, we like to work with you, enjoy the research cooperations, but sometimes it happens that Microsoft also attracts a lot of talent from universities. And I have to tell you that Microsoft is one of the most generous companies in this respect. There are others that are worse. But we face from time to time the problem that we lose our most brilliant faculty members, students, whatever. Lose is maybe the wrong word, but you're more attractive to them than we are. And in some ways, we cannot, of course, offer the same packages. How do you see this partnership and competition on the same time between the private sector and the public sector? I'm always scared that if you attract too much of our talent, that you kill the pipeline that eventually will bring down the road the new breakthroughs. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this
it's
tangent field?
It's a great question. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, because the balance that is required here, or first let's start. I mean, having a very rich collaboration where people are moving between academia and industry, or there is research grants that the industry gives in order for the academia to make progress in areas, I think is hugely important. In fact, I always will remember, one of the things that Bill had sort of said when we started Microsoft Research was that, hey, we, Microsoft, benefited so much from all the research that came before Microsoft was created, that it was our responsibility to take what was essentially our profit and commit to fundamental research. And so, and that is not to the exclusion of obviously everything that's happening in academia. So we fundamentally believe in that balance that is required. You bring up what is, I think, a very new phenomena where, you know, in the quote-unquote context of the shortage of talent and so on, there are these imbalances that are getting created, which I think are dangerous, because in the long run, in our own interests, it is important for great, you know, faculty to remain teaching the next generation of technologists and so on. As you said, that pipeline is very important. So what we are trying to do at Microsoft is to try and create that ability for people to move back and forth much more easily. And quite frankly, one of the other things that I also am interested in is to see how research that is being done, let's say, in Switzerland, is in fact being used by even a lot of Swiss companies to become very competitive in this emerging digital age, right? So it's not just about a few American companies and our research interests primarily to make our products better. But I want, at least in our context, it's core to our business model even, that we have these research partnerships such that there is great technology, great research being done everywhere. And that great research is translating into even local competitiveness. And so that's, I think, a very important one. And I think Mark is a good example of that, where at least he spent a couple of years and he liked the Zurich weather better. And so he came back.
We'll come to that in a minute, but I think you raise a very important issue. Universities have been, in my belief, too strict and too rigid in the interaction, in the transferability of people with industry. And the industry, of course, needs also to understand that academia is a special environment where special rules are publication rights, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have an intensive dialogue between corporations and academia, and we understand each other's business model better, and we both want to exchange more talent, I'm fundamentally convinced at the end of the day we will have both an advantage out of it. Yes, in a minute, Mark. I need to keep the time, but then I'll come to you in a minute. Let me ask you another thorny question. I don't know, maybe you guys are doing better than we are, but we have doubled the number of CS students over the last 4 years, roughly doubled. This was a huge effort, and it was partly successful. What we completely failed was to raise female participation in computer science.
What's the rate today?
What is the rate today, Marcus? 14 and 20, depending on the... Let's make 20% of the students are female. Is it better in Microsoft? Do you have more female talent in Microsoft? And if yes, tell us how you do it. And if no, whine together and then complain why it is not so. How can you get more women into this fantastic profession?
You know, one of the persons that I have been sort of learning from is, for example, Melinda Gates. When she did computer science in Duke, the female enrollment at that time was around 35%. This would have been in the early 80s. And so it's dropped since then to around 15 and is actually on the upswing to around 20% now, at least when I look at the numbers. We have a fundamental challenge. We've contributed to it as an industry by essentially not having enough of an inclusive culture and role model. I mean, I think that's where it starts. The good news now is there are more women joining computer science. The starting class, whether it's the intern class or the regular class at Microsoft, each year is more diverse than ever before. But the key thing is when they come to Microsoft, are we creating a culture where they want to feel, they feel welcome? That's the foundational issue. Because if they come and they feel that they are a minority, or more worse than being minority is that they are not respected, not included, then we're not going to ever change the dynamic upstream, right? So I never complain about the supply. I think it has to start with us in the industry in particular changing our culture so that more women are attracted in the first place. The good news is that it's moving in the right direction. We all are very, very committed, and not just in words. We have representation metrics. So at Microsoft, for example, even my own salary is pegged to making representation progress. But there's no way to make representation progress if you don't create an inclusive culture. So I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad it's a focus area. It's not just about one person. It's a much more of a systems challenge, but we are working on it very, very hard, and I'm hopeful that we'll at least get back to where we were in the early 80s, and we know that that's not good enough because we need to get to 50-50.
Let's work on that. We need this talent. Talent is the thing that makes your company thrive and that makes our university successful. Talking about talent, I would like now to invite you, Mark, to the podium, please. Mark Polyface, professor in computer science. Why is Mark sitting here? Because, of course, he's a fantastic faculty member at ETH, because he has some experience with Microsoft, because, for me, he's a role model that exemplifies what I mentioned before, the more intensive exchange between big corporations, tech corporations, and universities. And I'd like you, Mark, to explain a little bit what your experiences are, what you did with Microsoft, why you did it, and what you expect from this going forward, backward, this quantum state between academia and corporations.
Yes. Well, it's been an amazing experience. So I've been a faculty for, I was a faculty for 20 years. I'd never worked in a company before. And I felt there was really something to be done, like for myself, for teaching hundreds of students, that most of them will go to industry, will work there. I think there was a unique, it was a unique experience to be able to join a company like Microsoft, be able to immediately be in a role where I could actually learn a lot about how a company like that is run. It was really an eye-opener. I've learned a lot. I understand a lot better when I see now, what different companies are doing and so on, where things come from, how it all comes together. What was really attractive is I've always in my lab liked to combine more fundamental theoretical research together with more applied research. The goal of a researcher is really to make impact in some sense. Impact can be working with, with having a great idea, writing a paper, somebody else picking it up, working on that, and just making this type of advances. But at the same time, also some of those problems that you solve can really, when brought to industry, when picked upon and actually applied in industry, can make a much bigger impact, a real direct impact also in the world. And so that combination, combining those two things, I feel blessed to have been able to somehow make that transition, dive into into a company, be able to really work on some super exciting projects, work on a product that's still amazes me every day when I use it. I think this combination is very powerful. I think you can really get to a win-win. I think I had decided, and when we talked a little more than 2 years ago, before I had accepted.
That was when I was recruiting you.
Yes.
Poaching.
I told already back then that after 2 years I would come back to Zurich, and that at heart I'm really an academic. I've discovered that actually I also really love the impact I can make in industry, and so I love that combination. And so going forward, I'll try to combine both of those. Indeed, it's a bit of a quantum state. It's better not to observe exactly how I can make it work, but I think these are unique. There's unique opportunities. Is finding the right roles, these right combinations between the two. I think the richness of both ecosystems is super important. I think Microsoft has been doing a fantastic job in not only poaching indeed a few key people, some of them moving back also, or staying in between. But also vice versa. I think there's actually quite some, we've also, as ETH now, we've also actually recruited a lot of strong talent from Microsoft that are now professors here. I think in all departments, I counted at least 4 colleagues that were recruited away from Microsoft research. So I think as long as it's a partnership, as long as it goes in both directions, I think it's true that currently there is an imbalance in the industry. AI, computer vision, and so on. Robotics has had a huge increase in the investment in things that are being done in that space. And so that means that in industry, the industry is looking for senior leaders that can move, that can really make a difference there. There's not enough of them in industry because there wasn't that much of an investment before, and that's where there's currently a little bit of an additional imbalance. I think overall, it's actually quite healthy, the transition back and forth. I was trying very hard to recruit one of my postdocs to join the team at Microsoft. He had a faculty offer to go to Sweden instead, and that's what he picked. And on the one hand, I'm sad. On the other hand, I'm actually very happy that it's happening. I think it's not that bad, actually. The balance is pretty good, I think.
Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think overall, my own belief is that a little bit of what's going on right now hopefully is temporary, and that balance will increasingly become real. But let's take Switzerland itself. One of my fundamental challenges is not to just attract talent into Microsoft. In fact, if anything, I want a lot of great computer vision talent that is helping Swiss companies like Bühler, for example, to be able to take the latest computer vision and make their products more competitive. Or for UBS to be able to do best risk management using some of the cutting edge technology. So I would really say, even creating a great supply of talent locally is super important. And once you frame it that way, then it becomes this balance. To your earlier point, you are not going to have a lot of local supply if that balance doesn't exist. So I think that where the world has to go, that's where I go back and say, we've got to democratize. And this probably is a little, today, computer science is wonderful, but it's too elitist for its own good. It just needs to be something that people are saying, look, we need more computer science, and take out a little bit of this elitism in computer science. And it's not just about the graduating class sizes. I also think that computational thinking, for example, needs to be so much more broader in every discipline.
We have the data, of course, every department, and computer science helps us very much to really be a ubiquitous feature, a defining feature, but we need to go beyond the universities. We need to go into primary schools. We need to go in general public. Switzerland has a program that is called Digital Switzerland, where our chief executives are helping, and also you, of course, Marianne, are helping to make that whole vision a little bit clearer to the general public. It's not easy. Let me touch upon another thorny issue. I'm known to be only asking thorny questions. Sorry for that. If I listen to you two or to us three, I would believe everything is fine. Now I go to Bern, to our Washington, to our capital, and then I encounter often politicians who see a lot of problems. with interactions like you guys are having. They see a lot of conflict of interests, potential governing issues that are raised, and you're stealing away intellectual properties from the public, and then vice versa. There are all concerns about the secrecy and that. How can we break this? And I'm sure we need to break this contradiction. How can we make also politics understand that if academia and corporations work together, that then society at the end of the day will profit, being it by taxpayers, being it by progress for health or inclusiveness, being it by beautiful science. How can we convince politics about that?
Great question. See, to me, I go back again, Microsoft wouldn't have existed but for, I would call it, government spending and academic research. And so to some degree, I start from saying, unless and until we keep that vibrant, there is not going to be an entrepreneurial class that can really emerge in any country. Now, it is true that today, some of what is happening, for example, some of the comments Mark was even making, which is what is even considered applied engineering today or applied science is such a cutting edge. And especially in an AI world where data and the real world data feedback loops are important for science and is something that we'll need to figure out how to cut back, right? So in some sense, one of the key contributions to more than intellectual property even is how can some of the feedback loops that we have and we enjoy just because of the categories that we participate in, take computer vision, how can that be available? And the compute capacity that we have, how can that be available? And I think that that's the place where we really probably need to break new ground, where what is considered government spending, what is considered research, and what is considered commercial interests are really all the same interest, which is we collectively either make progress or we all collectively will step back. And to be able to figure out the new equilibrium, I think, is important there. I don't know, Mark, you have probably a good perspective on it now, having spent time on both sides.
I think that indeed we're in an age that's difficult, I think, because of a lot of people feel threatened by this technology. I think that we need to find good ways to bring the technology to show also what it can do well, really think through the systems as we develop them from the start, from the research. There's actually a big role also there for academia to really figure out how this can, along the lines of doing intelligence augmentation rather than pure AI with the goal of having an autonomous system do everything by itself. The goal is really to make clear that what this technology can bring is a win for people. It will make people be able to achieve more by essentially, when I now get to specifically to mixed reality and to things in that space, if you have a device that can actually help, in a sense, make you smarter by giving you the data that will help you solve the problem that you have in front of you. This can really bring, with some of the application, ThyssenKrupp, for example, when they give this technology to people out in the field that have to solve complicated problems under stressful circumstances, now they essentially get help by these devices, by also having this device enable them to communicate with their coworkers. You get in a situation where this technology makes life better for them. They are actually excited about using this technology. So we get in a completely different situation than in a place where you feel threatened by this robot that will take over your job. No, this is about having people achieve to solve more complicated problems.
And this is a very interesting new phenomena, right? These are the ThyssenKrupp example, or for that matter, many, many places where HoloLens is being used. I would have thought that HoloLens would be used in consumer and very high-end data visualization. Except what the last, 3 years have shown us is HoloLens is being used by people who never had a standard issue PC or even a smartphone. So this is the frontline workers in manufacturing who are being more productive because they now have the ability to really visualize things, get remote assistance, give them, as somebody who's in a remote factory, have an engineer who then makes them much more skilled. So I think that that ability to take technology and in some sense create more productivity broadly can be a massive breakthrough. And that's something needs to be understood by policymakers.
I think at the end of the day, it all boils down to we, academia, we, corporation, must work together to make useful things for the general public. And if we are useful to the general public, they will accept us. And they will see the advantages and less the dangers. If we are too arcane and too aloof and do not care to interact with this general public and show them the benefits of our technology, eventually we'll have a problem.
And since I'm in front of an engineering school and student body, I'll make one other ask, which is, I think today the application of a lot of what we talk about as cutting-edge technology is viewed very narrowly. Even the risk capital, whether it's in the United States or anywhere else, is going only to companies and sectors which are very narrowly defined and particularly bent towards, I'll call it, consumer tech. Time has come for technologies like computer vision or natural language or speech, and pick your favorite, to have a much broader impact across all sectors of the economy, right? And so whether it's healthcare or agriculture or financial services, and so that is something that I would sort of say, let's not think of the tech and the arc of technology very narrowly from more conspicuous consumption. If anything, we need to get beyond that and to really get back, and especially in a country like Switzerland, I think you can show leadership because some of the industries you lead in, whether it's in life sciences or in financial services or in manufacturing, applying cutting-edge technology can actually show the world how the broad sector impact of such things can be.
We're coming to the end of this fireside chat. Sorry for the missing fire, but you can all imagine it. Let me close this session with a personal question. You're a very successful personality. You have a very impressive career. Let's profit from this curriculum. What is the secret behind your success? We'll keep it confidential, I promise.
Look, I mean, you know, if I frame it as, oh, I have been successful, then it's the end of it all. In fact, if anything, I think the thing that I have perhaps most benefited from is, and people ask me this, when you joined the company at Microsoft in '92, did you think you will become CEO? Of course not. But did I think of my first job at Microsoft as an evangelist for what then became Windows NT? If you had asked me, what do you think of the job? I would have said, that's the greatest job I ever had, and I can ever have. And that's what it is. And so if there is any secret, the secret is whatever it is that you're doing, assume that it is the best thing that you could be doing. And life's interesting in the sense that when you sort of fall in love with what you're doing, it sort of finds you the next thing to fall in love with. And life's path dependent. I'm a big believer in it. And life's, I've been blessed with great mentors. But most importantly, I think I start each day saying, I got to learn. And that's helped me quite a bit.
I think we learned a lot from what you told us. Let's all thank you very much, Satya and Adela, for this fantastic discussion.